have a friend who a few weeks ago he texted me because he's Orthodox, and he and his wife have a few children who are special needs, and for a little while he'd been selling cars, but he ended up quitting that job on principle because he felt like he was being pressured to pressure customers into
Mm,
loans that they shouldn't be signing up for. And
mhm.
so he texted me and he said, do you know anything about Orthodox teaching on lending at interest? And, at what point is it sinful usury? And, can I actually participate in that? And it seems like he's found an actual very ethical place to work now, still selling cars, but it was something that he had to work through, and he really needed that help. He needed some pastoral assistance there, and my book addresses that and many other issues in the course of things.
Hello, my name is Melanie. I am the book publicist with Ancient Faith Publishing, and I am so excited to be here with Dylan Pahman, who is the author of our new book, The Kingdom of God and the Common Good. Dylan, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
I'm excited too. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into writing? Is this your first book? Give us a little background information.
Yeah, so I think it was in high school when I discovered that I really love to write. And there was I remember a short story project in 10th grade, and the teacher really just gave us no rules. It was just write a short story. It's got to be 10 pages. And I kind of always wanted something that was just open ended and creative like that. And I remember I went home and I worked really hard on it, and I brought it in the next day, and she looked at it and she said, "Oh, you didn't double space." Right. I ended up writing double the amount that I needed to. And that was a good
Boy.
indication that it was something that I really liked to do. But at a young age, you don't have a lot of life experience. So, it was kind of trying to figure out my place was difficult. But I read a lot back then, a lot of novels, and since then more academic books and things like that. But
Hmm.
it's always been something that I wanted to be a part of my life, and I'm really blessed that it has been a part of it. Yeah, so I grew up evangelical, and I'm very actually grateful for that. Blessed to grow up with any kind of faith, and it was just something that by the time I got to be a teenager, I was like, this doesn't all make sense to me, and
Yeah.
I wasn't really getting any good answers from like the youth pastor at the church I was at, and then like a lot of people, I just got to college and started staying up too late at Saturday nights and not making it to church on Sunday, and so it was kind of a journey back to church after a year or two. Through a piano teacher who her dad was a pastor, and then I ended up studying theology at Kuiper College here in Grand Rapids. And while doing that, I had a really great ancient philosophy class. The professor is now a good friend of mine. I was his research assistant for a few years, but every class at that school, the professor has to relate it to the student's faith, no matter what the class is. And so his way of doing that was to read the church fathers because they all read ancient philosophy, right?
Right.
And that got me really interested. And that's kind of why I took the class in the first place, too, is I
Mhm.
wanted to get a sense of, well, what are these ideas that would have just been part of the culture of the time when I'm
Yeah.
reading the Bible or I'm studying the early church. And so that was, intellectually, that was really important for me. And then the other side was I really wanted more than just you're a sinner, but you can be forgiven, but you'll still be a sinner, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And I found that by discovering our Orthodox ascetic tradition, reading the Desert Fathers, and actually trying things like fasting and the Jesus Prayer and other practices like that, and feeling like, okay, I can actually make progress, right? There's more
Yeah.
to this gospel than just like a one time, you got the stamp, you're in and you're forgiven, but you can actually be made whole. That's always been really essential to the gospel for me. And it's been so great becoming Orthodox. It's been 17 years now since I was first
Wow.
catechumen. And I was still a student at Kuiper. I think I surprised a few professors.
Yeah.
But that was something I found here in the Orthodox Church, with a church that cared about the theology, especially all the core stuff about who is Christ, and what do we mean when we say the Holy Trinity, and all that stuff. But it also really still lived the life that ancient Christians lived.
Mm.
I remember I joined our book club at our parish, Holy Trinity, here in Grand Rapids, and it was basically me in my 20s, and then like a bunch of middle-aged women. And we'd read these books and discuss them, and I remember like reading these books talking about like how to battle your passions, right, and wrestle with temptation and all this sort of stuff, and the vocabulary was identical to what you could read in the Desert Fathers. There was no
Mm.
translation needed, just because we were in the Orthodox Church. And I think that's such a gift. It's something that it's really easy to take for granted when we're in this context. But when you come in from outside, like a lot of converts like me have, it's something that I really treasured. So that for
Yes.
me was as much a part of finding the Orthodox Church as a kind of intellectual conversion. I really needed to find a place that felt at home and that had a place for spiritual growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in your journey, then, did you find that one desert father or spiritual father really stuck out to you, or was it more just the general desert tradition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I have a lot of favorites, I suppose, but I really like St. John Cassian,
Okay.
and I actually draw from him quite a bit in this book,
Great.
because he wrote like his On the Eight Vices is pretty clear and systematic. On the other hand, he has his conferences, which are just a bunch of conversations. So it's kind of a way of choosing all of them, right? It's a bunch of conversations with all these early desert fathers, and they're sort of like Platonic dialogues in the
Yeah.
sense of like Plato wrote dialogues, and it's unclear how much of this is Plato's opinion, how much of it is the people, the characters in the story. But I really find him super relatable, even though of course he's a monk and I'm not a monk and all of that. But he's an excellent communicator. So there's that. But my patron saint that I chose, because when you join you get to choose,
Yes.
is Saint John of Damascus, which is another way of just choosing all of them, because he's
Yeah.
sort of the first scholastic theologian in many ways, and his work, the exact exposition of the Orthodox faith, he's just kind of pulling the best of everybody who came before him, whole paragraphs and citations. And so I love that he's a church father that loves the church fathers. So,
Yes.
um, yeah.
Okay, so now is this book, The Kingdom of God and the Common Good, is this your first book? Or, I mean, what's kind of, the history for you of your own research and writing?
Yeah, so this is my second book. My first book is Foundations of a Free and Virtuous Society. It's published by the Acton Institute, where I've worked for the last 14 years. That came out in 2017, and that's written more from like a mere Christian perspective.
Hmm.
Now, because I'm Orthodox, there's definitely a higher frequency of Orthodox philosophers and theologians cited than you
Yeah,
would get otherwise. But
yeah.
um, that's just a very short primer on how to integrate a Christian perspective on the human person and insights from modern economics. So you can see how it's somewhat foundational to this book. But this book is the Kingdom of God, the Common Good. It's specific to our Orthodox tradition, really trying to dig into it, and really go to a level of detail that I haven't encountered in any book before. I mean, that's why
Mhm.
I wrote the book. I've been working at Acton, like I said, for 14 years, and I started working here as an editor, and I still edit our academic journal. Um, and I was reading all these great books, whether popular level or articles by academics, and other things like that, and seeing that other traditions had these tools
Mm.
for interpreting the modern world and questions of modern business and the economy and social justice and care for the poor. And I knew that there has to be an answer of, well, what's our Orthodox perspective? But it was very, very hard to find anybody who had done that work. And I kept digging and digging. It turns out we do have our own tradition in the modern era, but as people might expect, during the early 20th century, with the rise of communism in traditionally Orthodox countries, that really sidetracked a lot of that development. So I do bring out some of that theology, and I try to bring it up to date in the book. But that's part of the reason that our focus shifted suddenly. Instead of asking, well, how do we care for the poor in our industrialized economies today, it was, how do we be Orthodox when we're living in the West, right?
Right.
Suddenly we were concerned with ecumenical issues and questions of just being faithful Orthodox Christians. And those are very important questions. It's very understandable why that happened.
Absolutely. Yes. So you've mentioned that you've been at Action Institute for over a decade now. So
Hmm.
um, for those of us who aren't super familiar with Action Institute, can you just give us a brief introduction about what that is and your role there?
Yeah. So Acton's little tagline is uniting good intentions and sound economics. And what they do is they have a series of conferences, publications, media. They have some award-winning documentaries, such as Poverty Inc., for example.
Mhm.
Our big summer conference, which we call Acton University, which is not a university, it's a conference. But usually there's about 1,000 people there from 70 different countries, and it's experts talking to more general audiences and learning from practitioners and social workers and um, philosophers and all these people getting together and people from
Yeah.
different religious backgrounds as well. So it's a very diverse event. It's like 3.5 days, and that's like our
Oh,
flagship thing.
yeah.
And then we do have research fellows like me who I edit our journal, but I also, as part of my job, which I'm very blessed to do, given that all my degrees are in theology, I get to just actually do research and
Yeah.
write papers and publish. And so in the course of my time here at Acton, I've published over 20 academic papers,
Wow.
and on the basis of those, most of which are actually on issues related to Orthodox social thought and asceticism, I recently earned a PhD from St. Mary's in Twickenham, London, on the basis of published
Fantastic.
works. Um,
Congratulations. That's huge.
yeah.
This is fantastic. Thank you for that introduction.
Hmm.
Um, so for your book now, The Kingdom of God and the Common Good, how would you say that this book, this perspective of your book, is different than from just, oh, it's a book about sociology or it's just a book about economics? How would you say that this book has a very unique perspective?
Yeah, so I started this book as a series of essays for Father Daniel Greason's Ancient Faith blog, Every Thought Captive, which now is an Ancient Faith podcast,
Mhm.
not a blog anymore. And he was looking for people who could write on contemporary issues. And I've been doing this work at Acton at that point for 10 or 11 years, and I thought this is a good opportunity to really systematically work through all the stuff that I wish I'd known 14 years ago. It's the book I wish had existed back then. So, I mean, some ways in which it's different is uh, I don't just jump in and try to go systematically. I don't really think we're ready for a book like that. We need to know our own tradition. And I tried over the years. I'd go to conferences presenting papers and I'd talk to other theologians and other Orthodox scholars. And it was very difficult to get them even interested. Now, that's not
Really?
true maybe in the last 5 years. There's actually a
Yeah.
lot of scholars who are interested, but for almost a decade, it was really hard to find anybody who was interested in these questions. And so I really wanted to do something that this could be one book that leads to hopefully 10, 20 more, right?
Sure.
And so the design of it's a little different. Like if you were writing a book on, yeah, sociology or economics and orthodoxy, and you can see books like this, like I think there's some good ones on like psychology and orthodoxy or whatever. But usually it's going to be, okay, here's the concepts, here's our orthodox perspective, and then you kind of put
Right.
them together and that's it.
Right.
And that's great. Like we do need books like that, but I really felt like I had a responsibility, especially because economics can be so politicized, and
Mhm.
the things that I'm trying to get at are not controversial among economists. They might be left wing or right wing politically, but they're all going to agree on a lot of the basic stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that it was clear that the things I was saying were really coming out of a deep study of the scriptures and our tradition, as well as a knowledge of modern economics. Of how are we going to care for the poor in our very very weird world today? It's we have these timeless principles, but the world has changed, and that's okay to admit that. We all
Yeah.
know that's true to some degree, and there's a need for somebody to help point the way, and I hope my book can do this, or at least be the start of it, for people who maybe they're successful business people or lawyers, or there's someone who they've tried their best, maybe helping the homeless in their city, but yet they see the same people falling into the same cycles and they wonder, well, how does this happen? And why doesn't it seem to work that, you provide for someone's needs and they're better, right?
Yeah.
I have a colleague who actually he went the extra mile a year ago. We have a recent article about it with a homeless couple, young homeless couple. He had a GoFundMe. He raised money that he got them their own apartment or whatever, but um, there were just so many layers of trauma and bad habits and other many multifaceted issues that it wasn't as simple as in the ancient world, for example, where if somebody was homeless, maybe it was like they had a bad harvest, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't pay their bills, and so
Right.
then or whatever. And it's not that there's nothing transferable today, but we need to understand the complexities of our modern world. So
Hmm.
my thinking was, and that's going to be pretty overwhelming, and hopefully the book won't be, because I, instead of just bombarding people with all these terms, I tried to tell the story. I tried to tell first the biblical story, the story of our church history, and then the story of our modern economies, starting with the early modern era and some Western theologians who first kind of started thinking about economic issues, and then from Adam Smith to Milton Friedman. So that would be how it's different, is that historical focus. A model for me would be someone like Father George Florovsky, who really
Okay.
emphasized that we need to employ like a neo-patristic synthesis. That was his term, not the most marketable term, but that's what he meant was, we have this common ground, we have this deep well of thought, these deep treasures within our tradition, and we need to make sure that we're always tapping into that when we're trying to engage the present world.
Yes, yes. So it sounds like you're really trying to address the modern problem that we're all
Hmm.
doing, that we're all dealing with, versus just some kind of a textbook. Oh, here's
Right.
economics and sociology, and here's just an orthodox spin on that. Is that right?
Yeah, and that it is something that I do think could be assigned in classes, but not for the sake of, okay, copy down the definitions. There's no bold-faced terms or anything like that. But there's 5 parts to the book, and there are summaries and discussion questions at each end of each part. But
Oh,
the reason
great.
for that is because I hope it's a conversation starter, right? And
Yeah.
so that's to help people with that. So it's something that you could do in a book club at your parish, or I'm actually going to be teaching a class for St. Athanasius College based on the book next month. It'll be
Great.
starting. So it hopefully will have some versatility with that people can stop as they go through the book, review what they've read, and really ask themselves some questions that hopefully will get them beyond the text to start thinking about their own lives and the work that they do today.
Fantastic, fantastic. So it sounds like this book is going to be really marketable for clergy, for lay people, for students, all alike. It sounds like it's a very applicable book and an applicable subject for all of us in the
Y-
church.
Yeah, there's a lot of big ideas, but ultimately it's very practical. It's how do
Yeah.
we be faithful Orthodox Christians in our world today? And talking with priests, I know a lot of them would love assistance with some of this, and I've talked with lay people as well. I have a friend who a few weeks ago he texted me because he's Orthodox, and he and his wife have a few children who are special needs, and for a little while he'd been selling cars, but he ended up quitting that job on principle because he felt like he was being pressured to pressure customers into
Hmm.
loans that they shouldn't be signing up for. And
Mhm.
so he texted me and he said, do you know anything about Orthodox teaching on lending at interest? And, at what point is it sinful usury? And, can I actually participate in that? And it seems like he's found an actual very ethical place to work now, still selling cars, but it was something that he had to work through, and he really needed that help. He needed some pastoral assistance there, and my book addresses that and many other issues in the
Fantastic.
course of things. So hopefully it'll really fill a gap for people, and I think we see just a general trend of we have uh, a lot of people who are using this new technology, and a lot of them are very zealous and well intended, but sometimes they have very strange ideas about the relation between the church and the world. And they kind of just say what they say, and they expect people to take their word for it. And they haven't really done their homework.
Hmm.
At least I can say that because I have. And so, new people are coming into the church and they're kind of confused too. And I really think it's the sort of book that can kind of serve a dual role, whether it's for the clergy or intellectuals, or just for lay people who, they've found this special, ancient, timeless faith in the Orthodox Church, and then they got to go to work 5 days a week, and
Right.
they don't want to just leave that at
Absolutely.
home or at church. They want to carry that into their workplace. They want to be something that pervades every aspect of their life. And I hope that this can be a big help for that.
Yes, yes. So what would be an example then? Just I'm a visual person, so it's helpful for me to
Sure.
have examples. What would be an example then of what you're saying of, we need to do a little more homework on this, and this book helps, give a little more guidance.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, there's a few different examples. Like Father Schmemann talks a little bit about this in his book, For the Life of the World, that there are some people that they see, modern trends that they're worried about. And to stick with economics, let's say
Yeah.
they see kind of modern consumerism or materialism, and they say, "Oh man, this is just all terrible." And what we need to do is we need to just retreat into our little Orthodox enclave, and we need to kind of shun the world around us and just focus on being Orthodox, kind of orthodoxy for
Yes.
the Orthodox. And
Right.
um, I mean, there's some merit in that. We should, of course, care about our communities, and they should get a pride of place in our lives, but we don't live in a world that really gives us that luxury. We can't be Amish, and at least in the West, we live in religiously pluralistic societies. In my own neighborhood, a suburb in Grand Rapids, Michigan, we have Hindu neighbors and Muslim
Yeah.
neighbors and Protestant and Catholic, and they're building a Mormon temple around the corner. And um, I need to know how to love those people and how
Yeah.
to have a relationship with those people. I don't get off the hook by just saying, well, they're not Orthodox. On the other hand, you could easily go the other direction, right? And just say
Right.
that, well, everything's changed. And so, yeah, I'm going to be, and again, you have a lot of this sort of thing where people are doing this sort of like influencer culture and, that kind of thing. And it
Yeah.
ultimately, they're trying to get as many clicks as they can. There's something consumeristic about that, right? And so, they might be well intended, and maybe even their content is helpful, but they're too quickly just buying into a business model that maybe runs counter to our ascetic tradition
Right.
of stillness of heart, and um, taming the passions rather than giving into them and encouraging others to do so. So
Mhm.
I hope that's tangible enough. But
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. So, speaking of tangible ways, so does your book talk at all about, you know, tangible ways that as Orthodox we can be helping our communities? So, for example, at least in the area that I am, there is a lot of Roman Catholic orphanages or hospitals or soup kitchens, things like that. Do you talk at all, or do you have any thoughts at all about perhaps an Orthodox approach to this? How, we, at least around me, there aren't any Orthodox orphanages or hospitals. So, do you talk at all about that aspect of Orthodox?
yeah. Yeah, I do. And actually, the forward of the book is written by Stephen Christoforou, who is, I believe, executive director of Focus North America. So, one thing I would tell people, because I understand that frustration, is first of all just to remember how new Orthodoxy is in the United
Mhm.
States. I mean, there are people who are do good work, like Matthew Namey and his Orthodox history site, and he shows kind of these. How we do have deeper roots here than maybe we understand, but we were a very small minority for a very long time, and even today, there's maybe 2 million of us in the United States. People sometimes have the same frustration with the overlapping jurisdictions, and I get that, but like we probably need to move slowly to do it right, right? And um, building institutions is not something you can just snap your fingers and do. So the on the one hand, I do think we're actually doing a lot in terms of you can talk with Stephen. I think they have 12 or 13 now focus centers. Whether they're soup kitchens or homeless shelters or that kind of thing. I know the metropolis of Detroit at least had, I don't know if it still does, but had an orphanage for many
Hmm.
years.
Wow.
But I wonder if maybe changes in the laws, shifting to the
Sure.
foster care system may
Yeah.
have gotten in the
Yeah.
way of that. I'm not sure. The other thing with hospitals, the Roman Catholic Church, I think 1 in 5 hospitals in the country are Roman Catholic.
Wow.
But medicine is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country,
Yeah.
which means there's a huge compliance cost to get into
Yeah.
that. So I definitely think Orthodox Christians should, you know, do what we can.
Right.
But usually, what that looks like is more a vocational thing. So,
Yeah.
you know, we have people
Yeah.
at my parish who are medical doctors, right?
Mhm.
So they, as Orthodox Christians, are going out and being doctors, but they don't get to do that at, say, a modern basiliad or whatever, right? You know, they
Right.
don't.
Right.
Um, so it's something that it has to take the right person, have the right moment, the right investors and donors, and it could still happen, right? And I think it's important to have that patience. Sometimes, and I do talk about this in the book briefly towards the end. You know, sometimes we see all these issues going on, and my wife, I love my wife. She's always texting me, "Did you see this news article? And maybe you should say something about that, or
Mm.
what do you think about this?" And on the one hand, it's very admirable, but on the other hand, I could just completely depress myself reading through all the tragic news of just one day.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean I
Yeah.
shouldn't care, but I do have to ask myself, well, what about me in my
Right.
community? What are my responsibilities? Well, I have a wife and 4 children. I have coworkers. I have friends. I have a church community here in Grand Rapids. I need to be giving them far more of my attention than, you know, Instagram or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work, but that parish life, I really think it begins there. And I actually end the book talking about my parish life and some of the other parishes here in Grand Rapids, just to emphasize that while I think, you know, I've noticed that these other Christian traditions, they might have, you know, done a bit more in terms of theorizing their engagement with the modern world. We're still actually doing it. Like, we still have Orthodox social action,
Mm.
but it's really hard to find a book that's like the theology of the Greek festival,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it's actually an amazing thing if you really think about it. You know, the people are coming, they're buying and selling, so we're engaging in the economy. On
Yep.
the other hand, other people are volunteering their time. We give church tours, so there's an evangelistic
Yeah.
component to it.
Absolutely.
It's cultural, and it kind of wraps together a lot of the themes of the book. And it's something that I think, you know, we think about in terms of, well, actually, not necessarily parish bottom line, but specific ministries we might fund with the proceeds, and that's good. But I would love for us to see the festival itself as a ministry, and I really think it is, and other sorts of events, so whether ethnic festivals or other sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I remember as a convert, just by way of analogy, I remember joining the church, and some of the older ladies, again, like some from that book club I was a part of, they'd say, you know, you converts, boy, you really know your Bible, and we just don't know it like we should. And I remember thinking, like, I understand why they feel that way, because in Sunday school growing up, I did like these Bible drills where they would be like, okay, you know, where's the book of Nehemiah? And everybody would open it up and they'd
Right.
find the verse or
Right. The
whatever. So
sword drills.
yeah,
Yes.
you kind of, you learn, like, okay, the geography of the Bible, right?
Right.
But a lot of times it was you just memorizing verses out of context. And I remember our choir director, who's since passed away, but she was wonderful, Theoliz
Mm.
Seraphis. She had every Sunday gospel memorized before she
Wow.
died. Like, she just been going to church her whole life, and she knew it
Wow.
word for word. Or you look at our hymns, or all, you know, our prayers during vespers or matins, how much scripture is just saturated in our liturgy, and it's something that people in our church knew, but they didn't know that they knew it.
Right.
Right. And I
Right.
think it's the same way to some degree with Orthodox social thought. It's something that and we should expect this. It's something that just grows right out of the life of our parishes. But it's something that maybe we struggle to articulate. Well, what is it and how does it work? And again, how do we relate it to the world we live in?
Yeah. Yeah. And your book seeks to do that.
Exactly.
Just that's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Mhm.
So, what would you say then is the number one thing that you're hoping readers of your book are going to get from it?
I hope they see that the gospel is never outdated, right?
Mm.
That the you know the our song "Christ is Risen" has something to say about AI and the internet, and my, you know, jobs I've worked at a factory or as a janitor or even, you know, now in an office. All these sorts of things of life that just sometimes feel so strange and can make us feel so distant from our faith, from the saints we read about, that they live these amazing holy lives, and it feels far off. It feels like, boy, that was a different world. Um, the gospel is timeless, and it's powerful. St. Paul says it's powerful, and it can be powerful today too. And I really want that to be the takeaway. I remember some years ago, Father Raphael Daly, at St. Nicholas Antiochian Church here in town. I used to go there for matins, and we would talk sometimes afterwards. And I remember he asked me, if I'd ever like to go to the Holy Land on pilgrimage, and I actually would, just to be clear. By the time I was like, I don't know. I kind of
Yeah.
agree with St. Gregory of Nyssa, who's basically the one church father who said, don't go. Like, don't go on pilgrimage, just stay where you are.
Yeah.
But his point, he was talking to monks and he thought it was a lot of temptation, all the traveling and everything.
Right.
But his point was, he says, are there enough holy places here in Cappadocia? And I said, are there enough holy places here in Grand Rapids?
Yeah.
And, it's not quite the same thing, but I really think we need to start thinking that way.
Yeah.
I love the recent film Sacred Alaska. Simon
Yes.
Sianka, the director, is one of the endorsers of my book, and he just shows how the native people of Alaska really made orthodoxy their own, to the point where I've been hearing people talking about they want to go on a pilgrimage to Spruce Island,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? That's here in the Western Hemisphere,
Right.
and
Right.
um, why shouldn't it be Chicago or Grand Rapids or LA or wherever, or Detroit or New York? All these places can be holy. I mean, if you think of, all of the cities we read about, Ephesus and Rome and Constantinople, these were major urban centers. They were at the forefront of technology and civilization, and they had all sorts of vices, things that we can relate to. Why should our cities be any different? Why should we be any different in our own time? The gospel is just as powerful today, but sometimes we just need a little help seeing that, and I hope my book will help people see that.
It's fantastic. I'm sure it will. And I'm sure it's going to be a blessing to everybody who reads it. So thank you so much for all of your hard work on this. I think it's really going to pay off. People are going to be blessed by this. I
Well,
think
thank
it's
you,
really going to be
Melanie.
a gift. Well, thank you so much, Dylan, for your time. This has just been wonderful to get to know you better, to get to know your book better. I'm so excited to read it. And like I said, I'm sure it's going to be a huge blessing to all those who do.
All right, great. October 21. Be sure to
October
get your
21.
copy. That's right.
Pretty close. Thank you.